All right, so you might have seen with the silence is Leon was asking why is the dosage different for the quarter bottle dosages versus the other age groups and the adult group. Whereas here, if you do the math on these age groups here, the preschool, grade school, and adult, between the 2 bottle kit and the 1 bottle kit, it's actually the same. Whereas for infant and toddler, you have the same quarter bottle in both sections, but in essence, what happens is the 5 gram one ends up being a higher dosage. Here it's 0.625, and here it's 1.25. So grams. So what is the reason behind that, right? Why there's such a difference for that age group? Well, I don't have an exact answer on that, guys. I'm not really 100% sure why that is. Here is my take on it. Doing quick research on this drug, the cobalamin. This drug actually is suggested to be given at 70 milligrams per kilogram in pediatric patients. In the New York City guidelines, they're not giving you the this drug in a milligram per kilogram dosage. They're giving it to you as the size of the bottle, right? But when you look at other guidelines and you look at the drug itself overall and how it's supposed to be administered and what the recommended dosing is for this drug, what it is, it's a 70 milligrams per kilogram up to a maximum of 5 grams. So since this is sort of a high dosage sort of drug you're going to be giving to take care of the smoke inhalation, okay, or the cyanide poisoning, what you want to do is go ahead and give this drug in high dosages, right? So even though it's double when you look at the 1 bottle kit, okay, because the concentration is going to be higher, the 5 grams in 200 milliliters, it still ends up being 25 milligrams per ml in either scenario here, right? But what you're doing is you're giving that, what ends up happening is that you're giving that 70 milligrams per kilogram in essence for the patient, and you're not coming anywhere near close to that maximum recommended dosage of 5 grams, right? Because most infant toddlers that are 0 to 2 years old, their weight is not going to be going beyond that 70 milligrams per kilogram. It's not going to be getting anywhere near, right, 5 grams. If you sort of weight that out, the 70 milligrams per kilogram, you kind of convert that into the quarter bottle size in both infant and toddler for the 1 bottle and 2 bottle kit, you pretty much end up being at the most like 1.5 grams altogether, right? At the 1 bottle kit size, right? The most you're really getting here is 1.25 size of grams that you're giving the patient, whereas here you're giving a lot less than 1 gram. Okay, so that is why I think they're not really paying a lot of attention to the actual dosage in these two sections. All right, because this is a high dosage drug. You want to give a high dosage for these types of patients in order for it to work, right? So when you're doing that, your main concern is to give the dosage, but you don't want to go over what the recommended one is, and you don't want to go under what the recommended dose would be. So since New York City REMAC isn't giving the, let's say, what I've seen other protocols and what's recommended that I've seen dosages for this drug is that 70 milligrams per kilogram, they're not doing that here. They're giving it by the bottle size. So if you look at the quarter bottle for infant and toddler, both in the 2 bottle kit and the 1 bottle kit, you're not coming anywhere near that recommended maximum 5 grams. They're not even coming anywhere near the 2.5 grams, right? The most you're giving really is about a gram and a half, let's say altogether at the 1 bottle kit. So it's still well within that safe range for those patients that you're giving to the patients there. And I think the same holds true even for the preschool age years as well. Okay, so that's my take on it. Again, I'm going to try to send a question into the REMAC and see maybe if I can get a more concrete answer as why that is. But looking at the other protocols in EMS for this drug, and also the recommended dosages for this drug online that I've seen, it looks like that is most likely why they're not really changing that bottle size, right? They're not going to give you less than 1/4 of a bottle here, because then probably anything less than 0.625 grams is not really going to be worth or have any positive effect on the patient, right? Because especially when, again, the minimum dosage, the recommended dosage is 70 milligrams per kilogram. All right, and in this concentration, you're talking about 25 grams per milliliter. All right, so Leon, I hope that answers your question a little bit. Maybe puts it a little bit more in perspective for you on that. Again, I know it's not a concrete answer, but I'm hoping that maybe it puts a little bit in perspective for you. The other question that Leon asked was about mag sulfate in the pediatric non-traumatic arrest guideline, and pretty much when he talked about that, he was talking about max sulfate and torsades. Now, he said, in this drug here, they want you to give max sulfate 25 to 50 milligrams per kilogram via IV, saline lock, or IO, and there's no dilution here. And a lot of the other protocols in New York City, when you're giving mag sulfate, it's diluted with normal saline. And you're either giving it as a drip over 10 to 20 minutes, or you're giving it over about 2 minutes. So he's questioning, why is it you're not diluting it in this protocol as opposed to the other protocols? They're all adult protocols for VTAC, pulseless VTAC, VTAC with a pulse, and asthma, and also for OB/GYN. Why is it that we're diluting it there with normal saline, giving it over a certain period of time, but here we're not diluting it? Leon, this is another one of those questions. It's a good question, and I think it boils down to the concentration of the drug, where you're giving it here in the milligram per kilogram versus in the other protocols, you're giving a straight 2 grams that's being diluted in the normal saline and given over, let's say, 20 minutes, right? Because you're giving it to an asthma patient or you're giving it to a OB patient, right? Now, for the VTAC protocols, you're diluting the same 2 grams in 10 milliliters, but you're giving it over 2 minutes, right? But the life-threatening arrhythmia that you're giving it for those patients, just like here where you've got a life-threatening arrhythmia going on, this patient is apparently, they're talking about being in cardiac arrest, so you want to get this drug on board fast. You don't want to sit there with a pediatric patient in torsades and start doing a drip rate of as little as 25 to 50 milligrams, of a drug to a pediatric patient. Okay, so the idea, I believe, when they're doing this and not diluting it and not giving you a time frame to give it over, is because you want to get this drug administered to the patient as quickly as possible, because you're talking about a pediatric patient who's in cardiac arrest. It's a life-threatening arrhythmia like torsades, and you're trying to correct that as quickly as possible, and you don't want to start giving it over 2 minutes, right? Whereas the adult protocols, you've got 20 minutes for the asthma patients, and even 2 minutes for the VTAC with a pulse in their torsades presentation. A little bit more time is being given there, but it's also an adult patient, and you're giving a lot more of the drug. Okay, so that's my take on those 2 questions, Leon. Again, not concrete stuff. I don't have a direct line to New York City REMAC to find out the thought process behind this, but this is my take on it, and why I think it is that the dosages are just, again, you talk about grams on both of these protocols. You talk about grams versus milligrams, and you're also talking about the pediatric patient versus the adult patient, who, you're talking about that time frame of 2 minutes, 20 minutes versus a pediatric patients in cardiac arrest, where you want to give that drug as quick as you can. So I hope that answers your questions there, Leon. If not, let me know. I'll try to clarify it even a little bit more for you. But that is pretty much what I'm thinking is the main reason for that. All right, so let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen here, get me back online. Here I am. All right, the other question I have comes in from Heather. I don't have her last name. Heather, I'm sorry, but I did post it on the blog. Her posting is there on Facebook over on the blog. So Heather asked me about community paramedicine, what my thoughts were on community paramedicine, about the challenges of facing healthcare, and whether or not this is maybe a viable option for paramedics. Now, here's my take on that. That's a pretty broad topic. You can go online and look up community paramedicine, Heather, and find a lot of different sections, a lot of different takes on this. And I've actually talked about community paramedicine on the blog podcast as well here at EMS Office Hours. Me and Josh and a few other EMS providers have discussed this a little bit. Here's the thing with community paramedicine. Anybody out there doesn't know what community paramedicine is, pretty much they have a concept of connecting sort of underutilized resources to populations that are in their area, okay, their community, right, underserved sort of populations. So what they're trying to do is expand the role of paramedics to give health services and access to healthcare to patients where they really can't get, the patient really can't get to physicians, they can't get to clinics, they can't get to hospitals, and it's difficult for them, or even very, very rural areas where they don't even exist, right? So the community paramedic program is pretty much in place to try to serve this need of that community. Now, most of the time you talk about rural type areas, right? And you talk about maybe 75 million people who live in these areas across the United States. You know, the need for the healthcare that I mentioned is much more greater than the options that end up being available to these people. So what ends up happening is that you've got, you know, elderly patients, immigrants, people, you know, people who are in poverty or in very poor health. You know, they don't get care. Why? Because they don't have a way to get care. Again, maybe it's not there. It's a very long, you know, distance for them to go and to get this type of care. So the community paramedic program is in place to try to let paramedics sort of fill this gap, right? Fill this gap in healthcare by expanding that role of the paramedic. Now, it's not as easy as throwing a paramedic in a fly car and sending them out there doing it, right? Now, the community paramedic program, it's actually a curriculum in some places. There's actually, I think it's Minnesota, where they have the first legalized state training for community paramedics. And they go through, like I said, it's 120 hours more of training, and it teaches them all these other different things on, you know, primary care for a patient, things like public health, management of their chronic diseases, disease prevention and wellness, mental health for a patient, even dental care. And this is something that's being put in place, and a lot of areas are trying to use this to fill this gap in healthcare. Now, to me, it can be a little bit of a turf war, right? Because you've got home health nurses who are kind of already doing this already, right? And now here come paramedics trying to sort of almost take that job over from the home health nurses. But it's sort of like a catch-22, because what happens is that in a lot of these areas that I'm talking about, and the reason why the community paramedic program is in place is because there's not enough nurses out there, enough doctors out there to take care of this, to fill this need, and this is why the paramedic is being looked at as maybe a way to fill this gap. One of the problems that I do see, though, Heather, is beyond just the training, the turf wars with nurses and things like that. The other thing that I see, the other complication that I'm seeing, I think, Heather, is payment, right? A lot of these programs that I've looked at and people that and areas I know that have sort of implemented the trial program of community paramedicine are doing it based on grants, okay, grants from the government. So the question is, how do we get these programs in place, get these educational institutions, colleges and universities to teach this program, and get the healthcare services and the healthcare administration and politicians and legal issues taken care of in every little community to make this a legal entity across the United States. And Minnesota seems to have done it, right? They've made it legal. It's in place for them. But what about the rest of the country? And then on top of that, you have to think about the reimbursement issue. Ambulances and EMS is viewed by most insurance companies to be a transport agency. So now we're not transporting. Now we're treating and releasing. We're evaluating on scene. We're, doing sort of this long-term care thing. Where do we fit into that? How do we justify it? How do we prove to the insurance companies that this is a viable thing that EMS can do, that paramedics can do? I know that we can do it, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners out there know that we can do it as well. So the question ends up being, how do we prove that to the insurance companies to get them to reimburse us for these services on these patients, to show them that in the long run it's going to save them money because they're not paying for an ambulance transport, they're not paying for an emergency room visit, and they're not paying for long-term care of a patient, because we can go and do it on scene, and it can bring the cost down for them if they can reimburse us. So to me, it's sort of it's a lot of layers here, I think, with community paramedicine. And I think since I've been involved in a lot of things going on in EMS, and especially with community paramedicine, EMS 2.0 and all that, I've actually seen it advance more. I've seen more and more community paramedic programs popping up, and I think that it is a way for not just to fill this gap we've talked about. It can be a career ladder for a lot of paramedics that are out there who are willing to go for this sort of specialized training, and it's also a great way, again, to keep costs down in healthcare and to show that EMS is not just this ambulance that shows up, puts them on a stretcher, and drags them to the hospital. There's a lot more that we can do as paramedics, as EMS professionals and providers out there. It's just a matter of showing that we have that education and to prove that benefit. And I think Minnesota has a great system in place where they have made it a state law. It's a legal thing. They are approved certification, and this is all the first step to reimbursement and showing insurance companies that it's something that can be a viable profession and a viable element of EMS. And again, it's not necessarily, it shouldn't really be about the turf wars with nurses and all, because we're filling a void where there aren't nurses available, where there aren't those healthcare nurses that are available. In addition to the fact, we're also filling that void because paramedics work a lot cheaper than nurses do. Of course, and that's where you get that turf war. That's where you get that sort of threat of paramedics sort of encroaching on nurses' profession. Those are my dogs. I apologize for that, but I'm just about done anyway, guys. So that's it for today. Any questions, please be sure to post them below in the notes. I'm going to edit this video so that we don't hear all the silence in the beginning. And until next week, guys, as always, Jim Hoffman for EMS Office Hours. And what would Jim do? Stay safe.